Let's see if there's any other participants in here. No, there's no attendees so far either. Oh,
Yeah.
there's one attendee. Oh, and this is the candidate.
Oh, good.
Althea Stevens.
Did we, how many people are in the participants together? Oh, there we go. Althea.
Oh, and Yves.
Oh, we got a couple.
Okay, so we have some candidates here.
Ah, how many are scheduled to be?
3.
Okay.
Hi, guys.
Good evening. How you doing?
Hi, candidates. Look, it's just us right now, and this might be it. So then it's going to be all eyes on you guys. We can have fun. We don't have to do anything timed. We don't have to do anything rigid. We can just have fun with District 16 candidates.
Is it a fun district?
It is.
Really?
Of course it is. It's the best district. What are you talking about?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'm sure that there's all kinds of. All right, we'll have to say what's fun there. Where was Slick Rick from? Does anybody know? He's from.
He's from the district.
He's from the district?
Yeah.
Really?
By Grand Concourse, yeah.
He owns property there, I think.
Oh, okay. Well, that I don't know.
He should.
The district, and there is a park that used to be in the district that's right outside of it, Crotona Park. That's where everyone would convene and, you know, from dancing and freestyling. That's where most of like a beach street style.
Yeah, they used to call them jams back in the day.
But that was actually in your district.
Yeah, I mean, it's outside of the district.
Oh.
Yeah.
I read somewhere that Slick Rick had like 3 or 5 buildings or something somewhere in the Bronx. That's what he does now. He kind of, you know, small landlord.
It makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, it's good. He stayed in the neighborhood, yeah.
That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to, you know, stay and help the community. So it makes sense.
Yeah.
So let's just jump into it because you guys are here at 6:35. We'll end promptly at 7:30 and we'll give you guys the spotlight. So this is the Schneps Media PoliticsNY. I know we're calling them debates, but it's more like a discussion because the format of our debates is loosey-goosey, AKA fast and fun, AKA relaxed and natural. And look, it's just the two of you guys. So, I mean, I'd like to, and whoever's watching, thank you for watching. This is being recorded and it'll be on our website on politicsny.com/debates. We have recordings of all the debates. We are the only media organization in New York that's providing a platform for every single candidate to have their voice heard and faces seen. So take advantage of that. And everyone listening, these are your candidates, and we'll have you guys just introduce yourselves and tell us, you know, about yourself and why you're running. And then we'll just have a discussion. We'll talk about the issues that are most important to you, whatever you want to highlight. And then this video will be promoted across the Schneps Media family of brands. So a lot of different eyes and ears will see it and hear it. So let's begin with Althea. Tell us about yourself and why you're running.
Well, my name's Althea Stevens, and I was in youth development for the last 20 years of my life, working with young people, advocating for families, connecting them to services, and that was just like the bulk of my experience. And literally, every year I do a civic engagement workshop with my young people to teach them about being engaged in politics, why it's important to hold elected accountable, and just really trying to get them engaged. And my young people, being who they are, we're like, miss, nobody cares. No one's ever asked us to vote. Like, this is just not who we are. We're just regular kids. What could we do? And, you know, we got into a very heated discussion. And by the end of it, my kids turned to me and was like, miss, you should run for office. And they were the ones who started this conversation of me even thinking about running for office. I'm like, you guys, that's crazy. I'm a youth developer. I'm not in politics. Like, that's not what I want to do. Like, I'm here for you guys. And then when I started talking to like friends and family members, they basically was like, we've been waiting for you to figure this out. Like, this is something that you should do. So after praying on it, meditating, and taking a really long time, I was just like, you know, this is what I should do. And I got straight to work, right? I started meeting with community leaders, doing surveys, really getting out there and talking to folks, because I really wanted to develop a policy platform that was not something that I thought that the district needed, but really getting a reflection of what we really thought that they needed. And, you know, really And because I work with young people, really trying to explore with people who typically aren't necessarily in politics on a regular basis, or who are not engaged. And so here we are, I've been on the ground working as hard as I can. And the beauty of it all, I really feel like people see my heart. They see how dedicated I am and see how much I love my community and love my people, and how I'm going to fight to make sure that the Bronx get everything that we deserve and should have been getting already. And so that's where we're at.
Nice. Good story. I actually have a follow-up question before we go to our next candidate, but so did you reach out to the current council member? I didn't mention her name, Vanessa Gibson. This is her district, and I know she's running for Bronx Borough President. So just a question, if you have a relationship with her or reached out to her office in your process of getting ready for your campaign.
Yeah, Vanessa Gibson, I definitely reached out to her. Actually, my mentor, Diana Ayala, actually connected us. I've known Diana Ayala, who's the council member in District 8 for a number of years, and she connected us to Vanessa, and Vanessa Gibson endorsed me for her seat.
Awesome. Great. So now let's hear from our next candidate, Yves. I love that name. I always thought about naming my future potential child Yves.
Oh, awesome. Well, I'm happy to be blessed with this name. So good evening, everyone. My name is Yves Filius, born and raised in the South Bronx in the District 16, which I'm currently running for. Just a product of this environment. I call those that are from the Bronx a phoenix that was risen from the ashes and are now to create anew. So I grew up in the early 90s in the South Bronx and District. Went to school here. My house of worship is here. I started actually engagement in high school. I was a tutor for Southeast Bronx Neighborhood Center, which was in the housing development within the district. And I got into politics. And the way I got into politics was a member of my church who was a trailblazer in her own right and respective first a woman of color elected in office in the assembly. So I was proud to be a part of that. And I've worked for both state elected, this state assembly, for both districts that represent the 16th, then became the special assistant to public advocate, who's now the attorney general of the state of New York. I then transitioned and became the political director of the Bronx Democratic Party. And now I'm a lobbyist for the American Civil Liberties Union, where I've passed legislation on both the state and local levels. So I'm blessed to be a part and walked and grown through the way. I've been a youth director for my church, and I've always been hands-on to my community, and I always wanted to be a resource and an extension. And to answer your question, I not only know the current current councilwoman, but I've worked for her in the council and in the New York State Assembly. So I'm very, very well versed with this district. I'm a product of it, and I'm here to represent.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, I'm going to just go into something that I've been thinking a lot about.
Oh, here we go.
When they talk about police reform, defund the police, one of the things they're talking about is school safety people in the schools. And I have found, and just as an observation as a journalist, a lot of the school safety officers in public schools are Black women of color. And what I'm wondering is, when they say defund the police and we're going to pull out the public safety officers, I'm curious, that component of defunding the police, what's your views on that? I almost think, are those ladies going to be laid off, or how would that work? Do you think?
So, you want me to go?
Yeah,
Yeah.
please.
You take it. I can go first if you want.
No, go. I have nothing more to say on it. Just my thoughts.
Well, so for me, I say this all the time, right? When we talk about defund NYPD and taking it from that context, that is the ultimate goal. But there's a lot of steps that we need to take to get there. And so even with school safety agents, right, we constantly are hearing like, oh, we need to remove them. And that to me is not what we need to be doing. We need to say that is the goal and that's what we want to get to. But there's so many steps we need to get to before we even get there. So that is going to take time. And so some of the steps we need to be thinking about is, how are we going to transform our school to holistic learning environments? And that's not where we're at right now. So we need to do things like, invest in community schools where we're investing in services for our young people with mental health. I'm sorry, I have like really bad allergies. My nose is running. Invest in like mental health services, aftercare, supporting families and things like that, which comes with a community school. We also need to be working with our principals, because we also have to understand that the principal also dictates the environment of a school. So how are we making sure that we are having restorative justice practices from the top all the way down, right? Because restorative justice only works if everyone in that school building is versed on it and know how it works. And then we also have to think about, like you said, these are Black women, mostly Black and brown women, who are in school safety. So for us, we have to think about, if this is something we're saying that's our goal for us to transition them out, so then what do we transition them into, right? How do we train those women to now be a part of whatever phase we're thinking about? And the other thing I keep on pushing back, we do need to invest and have more social workers in the school, right? But those social workers also need to be reflective of the community that they're from, right? So it is important for us to make sure that we're training social workers from our community, and so that they can be a part of the community. But I want to also just stress that those safety agents also need to be thought about in this process when we're talking about, if we're going to transition them out, well, what are we transitioning them to? And I think there's a lot of things we can transition them to, like resource officers and different things that we can be creative about. So I think, that's the goal, but we're not there yet. We got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, let's hear. Oh,
Yves.
yes.
Well, thank you again for that important question. I do agree that we should not, the end goal is to, reduce funding to a certain extent, but more importantly, we have to look at this at this venture. School safety are not just people of color, women of color, our parents, to our children, to our leaders. And it would be a disservice to just all of a sudden abruptly, eliminate an opportunity and a livelihood for countless of New Yorkers. That's one. Two, if we're here to write policy, to introduce policy to make forthcoming change. And one way of doing that is introducing legislation that would remove these certain types of curtails within our schools, like metal detectors. And that's something that I've been pushing to eliminate from all our schools, also pushing to eliminate suspensions from children, because from pre-K to third grade, once we eliminate that process, we stop the recidivism rate from the school to prison pipeline. We have to start changing the policies in order to change the policies. That's what's happening in the buildings. And of course, that's partnering with our superintendents, partnering with our school board, our teachers association, but more importantly, with the individuals that are teaching our students. And secondly, giving accountability to our students as well, teaching them what their students' rights are, learning that, once they step into a school, they're not going to be policed. They're not going to court. They're going to a house of education, a house of learning, and a house, a place of higher learning and higher education and safety, and also incorporating a holistic approach. So it's not about defunding, it's reallocating. And we should be, focusing on the Department of Mental Health. We should be focusing more on SYEP, to make sure that we have other avenues and agencies that come together and work together.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, I mean, I can give my view, but I'm just a panelist, But I feel like I just think sometimes the school safety people, if you have them in there, it might not be kids in the school. You kind of, when I cover meetings and I see them at the front desk at night, it's kind of nice that I have someone I have to check in, as an outsider, I don't know how that works into it, but like, and this isn't only in communities of colors. Like, I've been, covering the city since 2001, and they have a lot of civic meetings in schools. And when they do, and you see a woman there when you first walk in, it's, I think it's good to see, as an outsider.
But the other thing you have to think about too is, if you're coming in the school building, it looks very different at night, right? But I actually worked in a suspension site at the beginning of my career. And that's not how it looks, right? I would go in a school building every day where children would have to go through metal detectors. And just imagine starting your school day out every day being searched, right? people would get in trouble for small infractions for like bringing a glass bottle in, and not on purpose, but because they went to the store and they forgot it was in their bag and things like that. And so those are things that we have to really think about, and really starting their day off every day feeling like a criminal. And so, yes, when you come in the building at night, a lot of times there's only one school safety agent, but if you go to certain schools, you come in, there's like 10 safety agents, and you're already on a defense. So we have to get to a place, well, what does it look like, right? Instead of kids walking into a building and being greeted and saying, and having someone say, good morning, how are you doing today? They're getting told, take your belt off, take your shoes off, walk through the metal detector. So let's just think about how we're programming our kids to already have a prison mindset. Like that's very traumatizing. And that's not in all schools. It's only in certain schools. And that's the other problem. It's equitable. So I 100% agree. Metal detectors is one of those things that we can eliminate right now. We know, I've worked in schools the bulk of my career, and I know weapons are able to get in schools with those metal detectors there. Kids get them in how they can. So like, we have to start thinking about, well, what works and what doesn't work. And I think metal detectors is one of those things that we can definitely start with.
Right. Do you think that the de Blasio administration, he kept schools closed for a long time, and as a result, a lot of the Black and brown kids, they didn't have Wi-Fi, and it's been alleged, I don't know, that a lot of them have actually fallen behind during the pandemic. And do you think he could have done things different? You think the schools should have been reopened? And as a follow-up to that question, since we're talking education, do you believe in charter schools and more choice for parents that want their kids in, parochial or, or charter schools?
All right, so to answer that, one is this was an unprecedented time for everyone. No one can say whether it was too long or too short. Countless lives were lost regardless, and there were also countless lives that were saved because of this, right? That's one. Two, and I mean, it's hard to say that children of color have been disenfranchised or wasn't learning. Even if the schools were open, it was going to be the same thing within our district. We have one of the worst performing school districts within New York City, and that shouldn't be the case at all. If we are living up as one of the most advanced technological countries in the world, then it's a shame that our school system isn't the equivalent of a third world country, and sometimes it's not even the case, right? So we really need to point the finger at administration to show what is lacking within our resources. And lastly, I believe that every parent has a right to choose what type of education is afforded to their child, whether they could afford it or they can't. But the last thing is that the institutions of education that should be afforded to their children should be the best. And that isn't the case, again, within our schools. We have too many opportunities where charter schools are imposing within school shelters, coexisting. That I don't agree with. However, I will say I am on the board of a charter school because that charter school opened up in the former school that I was in that closed down. And I believe in education. I believe in every child and every parent having the right to give their child the proper education afforded. So that's where I stand.
So I think for me, when you think about schools and schools being closed for the amount of time that they were, I think we have to also take into context, Black and brown communities were hit the hardest, right? So these families, we lost people at much higher rates than some other communities. And so even if they were open, a lot of our kids would not have been able to function because they were losing family members. I know a number of young people who lost their parents, who lost loved ones. And so those things have to be taken into consideration. I mean, if I'm going to give a criticism, I think my criticism would be is, when they were opening up and then closing back down and that back and forth, I think we needed some consistency. Also, too, when we think about schools closed in March because that's when the pandemic started. However, there was no real plans put in place, right? I think we have to get to a place where we're walking and chewing gum at the same time. You can do two things at once, right? So we were closed down and doing remote learning, and they should have been making a better plan plan starting in September, right? What does opening up look like? Where are the clear, concise plans? And it often felt like it was fly by night, like, oh, well, the rates went up, so we're going to close. And, we had those things going on. It wasn't consistent for parents. But part of that problem is because parents was not part of the conversation and planning process. Young people were not part of that process. And so when you take those things out and you take parents and children's voices out of the conversation, you get the things that happen. And for me, I'm a firm believer that we always need to make sure that parents and children have voice in these conversations because it affects their lives. And so, for me, I think that if that was my criticism, it would be those two things. One, that we should have been more concerned about opening and closing because that really put parents in a real disadvantage. And two, they need to make sure that parents and young people's voices are part of those conversations. And when we talk about charter schools, I say it all the time. I'm not against charter schools, but we have to make sure public school is an option, because what happens is too often, public schools become the dumping ground for charter schools, and that is unacceptable. So a charter school will take a kid, and if they can't meet their IEP or something like that, they'll be like, okay, we can't service you. And then they have to go back to a public school, and that public school has to take them. And so what's happening is a lot of times our public schools are becoming dumping grounds, and that's unacceptable, because then our public schools are filled with students with IEPs and behavior issues or whatever the case may be. And then charter school are able to say, well, we can't service those kids, so they can't come here. And so public school has to be a choice. So we have to continue to invest in public schools. Parents need to have the choice to choose the public school that they want to go to, because that's not part of the conversation. We talk about choice, but public school, you don't have those options. That's your zone. You have to go there, and that's just what it is. So if we're going to say parents have choice, they need to have choices for public school, and that needs to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, we can talk more about education unless you want to segue into other. Yeah. Sorry, Steve.
I just have one other quick question, and that is gifted and talented program. When they talk about specialized high school, there was a larger Black and brown enrollment in the specialized high schools when they had gifted and talented in those Black and brown communities. Do you think they should be brought back, gifted and talented programs? Hello? Did you get me?
I feel like I was just talking so much. So go ahead.
Yeah.
I agree that gifted and talented programs should be included. I believe this week the numbers came out for enrollment for next year's specialized schools, and I believe 7 people of color were accepted in Stuyvesant High School. Mm-hmm. It's a shame. It's a shame.
No, it's crazy.
We're living in 2021, and less than, not even 1% of people of color are within one of our specialized schools. This is the reason why I believe in retrofrying, which means retrofitting our infrastructure while rectifying all the past ills, and from everything, from racial sexism, everything across the board. And this is the perfect example on, us as people of color not giving the opportunity to be at the table. And this is a shame.
Yeah, Mike, what needs to change in order for that to change? And how can you fix that in the city council? And why haven't they fixed it already?
So I think there's a couple of things, right? So I think one, with talented and gifted and even specialized high schools, I think part of the process, we have to start thinking about these processes are a little bit archaic, right? Like, we know that children learn in very diverse ways. However, to get into these programs, there's only one avenue to get there, and that's a test, right? And we know that, kids learn in different ways, and they also are able to regurgitate things different ways. So why are we not moving in that direction? What does that look like if, you could submit a portfolio? And, some of the art schools, you have to submit like an art portfolio or something like that. But there's other things that we can do and to make it more diverse if we see that it's not working. And so, I often feel like sometimes it's a lot of blanket stuff. So it's like, talented and gifted, we feel like it's discriminatory, so let's scrap it. When it's like, okay, well, let's actually take a look at and to see what's not working. And what's not working is the standardized test. Like, our young people aren't necessarily taught for it, or they're not getting the extra help, or whatever the case may be, but they still have those skills, right? It just might not come up on a test. So why can't we have portfolio options? Why can't we have, where they have to do a presentation? Like, there's different things that we can do. And I think that is some of the stuff we need to start thinking about, and just being a lot more creative and cultivating when we're thinking about those things. And not just kind of just scrapping everything, because there is a need for talented and gifted programs, Like, I think sometimes when people have never worked in a school, they don't know that sometimes kids actually do learn differently, and they need to be taught in a different way than other children. And that's okay. And I don't know why we've got to a place where we're making it seem like that's a problem. There are some kids who are more advanced, and they need more advanced work, and there's some kids who aren't, and they need less, they need more help or whatever. But I think we just have to get to a place where we are looking at education in a very holistic way, and not this one size fit all, because that just is not how we learn, and we all know that.
Yeah, and also one thing that was removed. I mean, yes, we have talented and gifted, but we no longer have trade schools. And that was the lifeline within my district, lifeline, and most of our communities that are struggling. I mean, in the 70s and 80s, I know trade was a big deal. Smith High School down in South Bronx was a place where my father, received his technical degree in mechanics. So, you don't have to graduate and just say, all right, I'm going to the next level. You can graduate and have a certification. That's what we should be focusing on as well. Making sure that our leaders tomorrow, at least if they graduate, they have an option if they want to continue education, or have an opportunity to have a license and go into the working world. This is what we have to encourage. We have to push, because that is a pathway of home ownership. That's a pathway to entrepreneurship, and that is the path that we should be teaching and pushing our leaders.
You have another question? I got one if you don't, Scott.
Go ahead.
What's the biggest commercial strip in the district? And how would you like to develop that business in that commercial strip? Like when people go shopping on Saturday, where's this strip?
All right, well, I'm proud to say that my campaign office is on one of the busiest strips in the district, and that's 161st. We have the 161st Street bid, which one a small organization a lot of people are familiar with is located here at Yankee Stadium. And I would love to bolster it, because we actually only have one business improvement district in the district. But I would love to incorporate and expanding that to the Jerome Avenue rezoning project that just occurred, and one of the last things Bill de Blasio has forthright. So incorporating a new business improvement district that would strengthen up the current one, and also bolster up and continue the uniformity and longevity of small businesses and mom and pop stores across Jerome Avenue from 167, 170, all the way up to Mount Eden. So that's my goal.
And so for me, I'm big on making sure that we're thinking about what does it look like in the future, and how do we make sure that people who are from this community and live in this community have opportunities to start and own their own businesses. A lot of the business owners who are in the district don't necessarily live here. And so for me, it's like, how do we ensure that any new development that comes here has opportunities, and the people who live in the community has first dibs on getting these properties and leasing these spaces, so that they can now have, so we can now start keeping money into our community. I'm big on making sure that we are figuring out how do we keep money in our community from each other, right? A lot of times when people don't live here and they have businesses here, taxes are being taken out and it's not being reinvested. So for me, it's thinking about how do we make sure, especially with the rezoning and all this new development that's coming in, we're ensuring that businesses that's coming in, people from our community in our district, have the first option to get these leases, and making sure we're keeping money in our community.
I'd like to ask, I know, because this is more like a conversation that we're having, is there anything that either of you want to say makes you very different from the other one, or from that makes you stand out in this race in general in the 16th council district?
I mean, I can, oh yeah. So I think for me, I think I'm a unique candidate, right? In the sense of like I started out in youth development. And I come in with a very different perspective on how things should work. I think sometimes, we often have a lot of electeds who spent their entire career in politics. And so they see things from that lens. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's about how do we have diversity in our local elections. I think that is important because then you get to see things from a different lens. I've been in programs where we've had to go and, advocate and fight for these things. And so I've been on that side, understanding programming, understanding and seeing things in a very different lens. So I come in with a lens that's very different and unique from a lot of people who are running for office in general. I come in with a nonprofit lens. Also, too, I'm the only woman running in this race. And we all know in city council specifically, there's only 15 women, which is crazy. And this seat has been held by a woman. And the city council, we can't afford to lose any women's seats because that could be detrimental. Representation matters. It's really important. People do not realize that because there's only 15 women in city council, most of those women are on multiple committees. Most of these women have to do double the work because there's not enough women to be on all the committees and be a part of all these things. So to me, it's extremely important for me to fight as hard as I can to ensure that we have equity and representation of women and women of color in city council.
Okay. Yves.
All right. Well, I believe I'm the best candidate because I was born and raised in this district, worked within politics in every facet from the state and city and citywide, and only candidate to have introduced and passed successfully bills from state and local, passing the farm workers bill, giving rights to farm workers just to be unionized, have a day off, to the green light bill, giving opportunities of those that are undocumented to have a driver's license in the state of New York. And I've also challenged NYPD by introducing the POST Act, which is 60 days prior to buying surveillance equipment, they have to disclose it to the public. So NYPD has to disclose it to the public and NYPD inspector. So I'm here with educated knowledge, legislative knowledge. I've worked on the forefront with almost every group within the district. I have been a person that really doesn't talk. I like to get my hands dirty and like to do the work and just come out with just the topics. And lastly, absolutely correct what my colleague has said. This seat has been held by a woman, but the first person of color to be elected in the borough of the Bronx into city council was a man of color, and this was the seat. So, and that was less than 50 years ago. So it doesn't matter about the sex of the individual. It should matter about if the person is credible enough to get the job done and be dynamic enough and pass legislation that's forthright for all New Yorkers.
So I know we talked about education and we talked about public safety in the context of education. You touched on police stuff. We can dive more into police. I know you mentioned defunding the police, reimagining the police, or is there another issue that you want to highlight, either one of you, as the number one issue in the community?
I mean, one of my main pushes is housing as a human right. Like that has been one of the things that we've been fighting for, and I will continue to fight for. In our district specifically, we have the highest concentration of young people in transitional homes. We have the highest concentration of shelters, and that's a problem, right? Like I don't think people understand how that really affects a family when you're in constant transition and you don't have a stable home. And so for me, we really have to start thinking about how do we move New York City from a shelter city to a permanent affordable housing city, right? And I feel like affordable housing, that word is thrown around a lot, where everyone's like, oh, because we're building affordable housing. But for me, it's like, well, who is it affordable for is the first question we should always be asking. And how are we ensuring that the people who are in this community are the ones who are able to actually be in these new affordable housings that we're building? There's some things that I think that we definitely need to be doing by working with our state and federal electeds to really look at the annual median income to make sure that the catchment area is not as big as it is, because in our district specifically, the annual income is $26,000, but often the annual median income for those affordable housing start about $40,000. So we have to get to a place to say, like, I understand, we need to have tiers, but we also need to make sure that people are getting out of these shelters. The city is often willing to invest in having families in shelters and pay up to $350 per night for families to be in a shelter, but they won't, give them the support to stay in their homes. So, we have to get to that place. And, Vanessa Gibson has done a really good job of making sure of right to counsel. That was one of the biggest legislations that she passed, and really got that passed. And that's something that we needed in this city, because we know that renters who go to a court with a lawyer has a much higher rate of actually winning. I've actually been evicted before and been in a courtroom with a lawyer, without a lawyer, and not knowing what the process was, and just really fumbling, and then and I won in the end, but like it was just so scary not to like know the process or what was going to happen. And so that was really important legislation that she passed. And so for me, it's bold and innovative ideas like that I want to continue to push forward, and to make sure that we have some stability for our families and our community.
Yves, you want to add to that or talk about a different issue that you find?
One thing that's near and dear to my heart is environmental justice. The Bronx has 24% parkland, but yet we are leading the nation in the worst asthma rate imaginable. And we need to know, how do we transform that? How do we reimagine a community where we can live within an environment that we create that could protect us? And that is, going green, like retrofitting our infrastructure with green, we're going green and just adding. And that's like implementing, green roofs and implementing programs that would plant more and grow more within our community. I'm encouraging our youth groups and community-based organizations, giving them resources to allow them to become farmers within our community. We have the most islands within a borough, but yet we cannot travel to them because we have no ferry access. How do we grow as a borough? How do we grow as a people when we can't travel the same as our brethren in the other boroughs? That's adding, new forms of transportation, reversing the carbon footprint in our community. That is the goal. That is the plan. And with that, adding new jobs, seasonal jobs that would do planting, seasonal jobs that would do things like bird watching within our community. Get our children more engaged on a civic approach, by having them create new groups within our community. That's a way of engagement. That's the way of growth. And that's my focus, and that's my goal.
And just to add a little bit on to what he talks about in the green and environmental, and one of the things that I talk about too is like food insecurities and how those things are very connected to the environment. One of the things I'm really big on is thinking about how do we create food cooperatives in our district and our communities, and have people learning urban farming, getting some of these rooftop gardens going, and, having urban gardens in our communities, because I say it all the time, we can't start a revolution if we can't feed ourselves. And at this point, no one knows how to do that. So we have to get to a place where we're getting back to the basics and getting people to know how to feed themselves. And it does bring jobs, right? We can have people working in these industries and making money and also feeding our community. Another huge issue in our community is food insecurities. We are in the Bronx where all of this produce and food comes to, but most of it goes out. And, we need to get to a place where we're self-sustaining and figuring out what that looks like. So starting food cooperatives and green gardens and urban farming is definitely something that I would want us to be championing moving forward throughout the city.
And what about, let's talk about seniors. Do you have a large senior population in the district?
Yes, we do. We have a very, very large one. Not only that, our dynamic is actually different, because a lot of our seniors are also parents or are
grandparents,
grandparents that oversee. And we have the first in the nation grandparent housing, those that are grandparents with dependents, to have housing. I would love to incorporate more of that. And not only the district houses the first senior center in America, the William Hudson Senior Center on Webster 169th Street. When you go in, there's a picture of RFK with Jacqueline Onassis sitting watching a show in the mid-60s. So it shows the history that's preserved there. The first senior I met there was a dancer for Duke Ellington and during the Harlem Renaissance in the Roaring 20s. So we have that type of history that we can engage with every day. But if you walk by it, you wouldn't know.
You didn't know what it was because it's like right next to the
fictional.
project, so people walk by it all the time.
So that is what I mean by owning and getting accountability and giving back, especially to the seniors, because we have to, give them some dignity, as they've grown and given us the opportunity to live and thrive here. We also need to do that in the same.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of having seniors age with dignity. I think that that's really important and something that, we often don't really think about, right? So, one of the things that I noticed too, right? Somebody told me one day, they were like, the seniors are sitting at the bus stops. They're not sitting there because they're waiting for the bus. A lot of them are sitting there in between their walks because there's not like benches and stuff like that. And it's things like that like us young people just kind of just don't even realize. I was like, really? They was like, yeah, it's no. So they typically stop at a bus stop and sit at a bus stop. And so I'm a big proponent of thinking about how do we ensure that seniors age with dignity? And that's making sure that we have senior centers that has active programs, that we have actual affordable senior housing, and also just like making sure that we have companionship programs to make sure that there's space for them to socialize, because we also realize that a lot of times that they don't have a lot of socialization, having intergenerational programs where young people are coming in and adopting grandparents and being a part of those things. I've actually done some of these things when I was running programs, and those things really do matter, right? Like, and even thinking about Mother's Day's coming up, there's a lot of people, a lot of seniors who, who don't have family, who are near and dear. And so like, how do we incorporate and have space for young people and older people to come together and really mix and mingle, so, how do we have event space and, young people going to senior centers to really have them mingling. And so I'm a big proponent of thinking about, being creative about our spaces and thinking about how do we, get everyone together and creating space.
I think intergenerational. I personally, I like the idea of older people with younger people. I think that would really work well. Because a lot of times kids don't listen to their parents, but they listen to their grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they definitely do.
I remember one time I took my students to the senior center and they went to go play pool with the seniors. These seniors hustled my kids. Like they hustled them. My kids was like, nah, I know how to play. I'm gonna go in here, and they hustled my kids. They was like, oh, they were like playing for fruit. I'm like, first of all, you're not supposed to be gambling. And they hustled my kids. They took all the fruit.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of intermingling, one of my first events was at the Hudson Senior Center, where I did a teen Jeopardy tournament. So I had our youth, summer youth groups, come together, study all summer. And at the end, they had a tournament at the Hudson Senior Center. So the crowd was all the seniors there looking at the future. So
is there a lot of seniors that attended the Hudson?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Hudson is one of the most well-attended senior centers in the district.
That's really interesting.
And the food is amazing. So if you come up in the Bronx, stop by.
Oh, really? Who prepares the food? Just regular people?
No, there's a staff. There's a good staff there. Yes, the permanent agent is in the building. We have great workers. Dr. Rosie Mills, who's the executive director there, does a great job, runs a tight ship.
Anything more from you, Sky?
Well, I know we didn't talk about police a lot. We could talk about that, but I know it's sounding a little lighthearted. But is there anything else either of you want to focus on or want to talk about or want to put out there as far as your platform or concerns, or tell us a fun story about yourself, whatever you want to put out there, we can devote this time to.
Oh, I'll say before that, do you think Scott Stringer should resign because of the allegations against him? Might as well talk a little local politics.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, you are innocent until proven guilty in the court of America, and if there's allegations that are strong enough that render him otherwise, then he should step down. But other than that, it's a free country. You can run and let the voters decide.
Althea?
I mean, I think that this is a very touchy subject in the sense of, we always have to believe women because we know that it's really hard for women to come forward when they're making allegations and things like that. And most women don't come forward because people typically don't believe them. But, I think we just have to, I think what my colleague just said is important. Like, there are things that are in place that we need to make sure that we're investigating and we're getting both sides of the story and making sure that all the facts are being presented and everyone has all the information so that they can make their own conclusion. And should he step down? That's a personal decision that he would need to make.
It's interesting because I think about what happened with Governor Cuomo, and when he was doing his daily briefing, I knew women's like, he's hot, and all of a sudden, all these allegations came out of the woodwork, and I don't know whether they're true or not, but I think he deserves his day in court. What do you think on that?
No, I think we are in a very in an interesting time because there's a lot. I think people don't realize that we're getting into a real slippery slope here. That if the only thing that needs to happen is that you are judged in the court of opinions, then that becomes a problem, right? And that's where we're moving in the direction of like, oh, this is what happened. Someone said this, so then you automatically are canceled or dismissed. And so we have to get to a place where we're actually investigating, letting things, letting the facts come out and speak for themselves and not rushing to judgment. I think we've been rushing to judgment really quickly and not thinking things through. And so we have to get to a place where, we're letting the facts come out. And, when we think about Cuomo, we have a very powerful woman who's the state attorney general, Tish James. And so we need to make sure that she's doing her job and trust that she's going to do her job, right? Like she's never not done her job. So why wouldn't we let her do her job? And so that's where I'm at. Like we have to trust the process.
And to answer quite candidly, I'll answer the way that when the famous same-sex marriage conversation was happening in the state of New York, I heard an answer that I'm gonna stick to, and everyone has a right to a divorce, right? Like it's at the end of the day, you have the opportunity to. I mean, if you did it in terms of wrong or indifferent, we just have to plan it out. We just have to see, let the process read itself, and at the end of the day, guilty or not guilty, let that person have their day in court. That's it.
In that same vein, since we're talking about other candidates running for office, do either of you want to share maybe who you may vote for mayor and why?
I have no idea, to be honest. I've been very focused, but I have no idea.
Well, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I recently have made my decision, and I will be voting for Ray McGuire.
Why?
I believe that his expertise in his field and a vision, not being a political person that's fixated on just fixing political issues and trying to fix issues for all New Yorkers across the board. It's something refreshing, something new. And I just resonate with his message.
That's interesting. You were supporting anybody for comptroller?
No comment at the moment.
Okay. I know Brian Benjamin's from near you guys, like I'm from Brooklyn. So,
Well, I'm actually a Harlem girl. I actually grew up in Harlem and I've been in the Bronx for the last 15 years. So I grew up across the bridge.
I see. So do you support anybody for comptroller? Or?
Yeah, I've been supporting Brian Benjamin. So we've been working together. So yes.
Yeah, it's interesting that it seems like the Bronx, the voter turnout's a little light. Is it light in your district? Do you expect a big voter turnout?
Well, the Bronx has some of the lowest voter turnout rates, right? When you look at the last primary, even for the presidential, we had the lowest turnout rates. I think we have a lot of work to do around civic engagement and, civic education. And I think that we've all been doing that. I think, with this group of dynamic candidates running in the Bronx. Everybody's been working really hard to do civic engagement and civic education. And so it's going to be really interesting to look what it looks like in a couple of years after all this work that everybody's really been putting in. So I think that we're low, but we working. We all out here working.
Yeah, it's extremely low, but you know, we have a very, very vivacious and group of folks that when they do vote, they come out to vote. They're extremely passionate. They're extremely knowledgeable, and again, it's just galvanizing our new residents and folks that, you know, may have been, you know, turned off by politics for a few years. So, and it's nothing we both can't
All
do.
right, not to cut you off, I was just gonna say, and I think a lot of times it's like what my kids were saying, they don't feel like this doesn't matter to me. I mean, I've had so many conversations with young people, and not even just young people, people in general who are like, well, the government doesn't do anything for me. And I'm like, well, that's not true. Like, you know, and really having to get people re-engaged because, you know, sometimes people can't make the connection of like the work that local politics and politics in general have on their lives. And I think it's just about, it's like I said, just doing that work to get them re-engaged. But I do agree with my colleague when he says there is a lot of people who do vote and they're very engaged and are very aware about what's going on in politics in local and, you know, generally.
I'm going to take a page from my colleague Sky's thing. Tell us something about yourself that's fun, or how do you say it, Sky?
Yes, I know. I do my 3 questions in 3 minutes, and neither of you have been on my little show.
I actually reached out to you, and I think you just emailed me like 2 weeks ago.
Oh,
So are you on my calendar?
I don't think so, because I think my campaign manager was like going back and forth with you, but like, let's get it on there. I reached out to you a while ago, so let's get it on there.
Okay, let's make it happen. I'm gonna circle back and make sure you have my Calendly link, and Yves, you too. So right after this, okay, let's do it. Next week's the last week to do it, but it's supposed to be fun, something like this. But the question that I ask is to tell us something fun or interesting about yourself that may not normally come up on a political interview. And then whatever you share right now, you have to share something else on the 3 questions in 3 minutes with me.
Oh my God, no, that's not fair.
You can't have a repeat fun fact, okay?
you're going to have to think 2 things interesting about yourself.
Part of being a fun fact is that it's supposed to be surprising.
One of the fun things about me is I have 2 turtles. Their names is Purple and Squirt. And I had Purple for 17 years and I had Squirt for 15 years.
How big are they?
So they're about this big. So they're not big.
Oh my God. But like land turtles, box turtles, sea turtle, what kind of turtle?
Not sea turtles. They're just
that's illegal.
So funny story. One of my kids actually, when I first started working with young people, he gave me the turtle as a gift. And this is like one of those gifts that keep on giving, where I still got to buy food. I got to change the water every week. I'm like, Jesus Christ. But no, they're just like regular little small turtles that you like get from like Chinatown. And so I've had I had Purple for 17 years and Squirt, I had him for 15 years. So they're old and they still kicking and very vibrant.
Yeah, I think turtles live for a really long time. I remember going to a zoo and I met.
They don't pay your bills.
Yeah,
I could.
Yeah. Wow. No, I'm not sure what kind of turtles live for a long time, but I remember meeting a really big turtle, like a Galapagos.
That's like a tortoise.
Yeah, they live 100 years.
Yeah, this one was like 100 years old.
I didn't think the little Chinatown turtle was going to live for 17 years. Like I got it, it was like this big. And I'm like, all right, but I won't lie. One time I thought my turtle died and I was like crying. It was a mess. And my mother was like, I need you to calm down. And then he was like playing. He just stuck his head out. I was like, oh, you're not dead.
Wow.
Wow.
What about you, Yves?
I was a Boy Scout in the district growing up, and that was fun. We were the only troop in the South Bronx. So I spent the night at Van Cortlandt Park as a Boy Scout.
Really? You pitched a tent there?
Yep, everything. We cooked everything.
I was in the Adventure Club in high school.
The what club?
Adventure Club. So we used to go camping and hiking. I'm like a low-key outdoors type of girl.
Have you ever fished in the Harlem River?
No, I ain't do that. I'm sorry.
No, but
Like, no.
they got people fishing, don't they?
No, people fishing in the Harlem River.
No, I've seen people fish and
No, they do.
Yeah.
Catch stuff, and I'm just like, no, you shouldn't eat that. But my uncle, he used to go fishing in the Harlem River all the time. It was very strange. And this was back in like the early 90s, and I was like, I don't think you should do that.
Mm-mm.
he didn't eat them, did he?
I didn't eat them. I can tell you that. I don't know what he did. But the Harlem River is very clean now. You saw we had dolphins are coming up. Like, we've made some progress.
How far do you live from the Harlem River? Is it district border, the Harlem River? Or is it? What's that river that separates Manhattan from the Bronx?
Yeah, it's the Harlem River.
Yeah, that's the Harlem River. Yeah, right there.
Red Park Towers.
Is that your district?
I'm right there, huh?
Yeah, it's in the district. It's in the district.
It separates Manhattan and the Bronx.
And
Yeah,
I thought
we have,
people fish on-
how many bridges we have? We have one pedestrian bridge, which is High Bridge, and we have 55th Street Bridge. We have the Alexander Hamilton Bridge, which is like, I don't know how you call that. That's 95. So we have a few bridges that go out in the district. So we have some riverfront, and we have a state park. We have Roberto Clemente.
Yep, it's very nice.
Which is amazing. There's only 2 state parks in the city. So thankfully we have one, well, 3, right? We have
Riverbank and Roberto Clemente is 2.
No, there's one
in Brooklyn.
Yeah, I forget the state park.
It's Brooklyn. I don't know kids about Brooklyn.
Well, I'm in Brooklyn.
It's very far. Brooklyn is like, I have to charter a flight to go to Brooklyn. Like,
yeah, that's true.
I'm not into, like, I drive to Brooklyn. It's like, I drove an hour and a half and I'm still in New York City. I'm done. Like, we're done with this. It's too far.
Right. What do you know, there's some issues that, they always talk about, like white-black relations and stuff, Asian-black relations, like the Chinese community and the Black community. There's some, I don't know, there seems to be some give and take there. There's some kind of something, I mean, there's a lot of Asian, Chinese restaurants in the neighborhoods, I'm sure, and nail salons and fruit stands. Am I mistaken on that?
What's the question?
I guess the question is,
We were just having a very light and easy.
I know.
Now you're like
thinking about it. I was just thinking about it. Like the Asians will go with SAT things. They're like, we study, like that's their thing,
Well, all people study. I'm not really sure where we're going with this.
Yes, Steve.
All right, I'm sorry.
Forget it. Steve's tired. He needs a drink.
Get it.
That's it.
Like, it's Friday, 7:30. All right.
If you were going to try to tie that with the specialized high school question, yeah, it's like, well, we know that one of the highest populations of people of color in Bronx science is Asian. Like, then all right, I got you on that one. But other than that, no, in our district, we are extremely diverse. We have a huge population of folks that come from the Caribbean, Central America, and West Africa. A small, very, very small population of Asian, but those that are, business owners, and the relationships here have been extremely cordial, to the point where I remember growing up, right behind McKinley Houses, there was a Chinese restaurant that always hired people of color, students that went to Jane Addams High School. So I'm very, very familiar with our relationship. There are multiracial folks and families in the district as well. So I would say here, the Asian and Black relations has been fair.
Good. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to get serious. I know.
Yes.
I'm here to answer you.
I just didn't know where you were going because there was no question there.
No, you're right. I was just, there was no question. I was just thinking about it.
It's okay.
So listen, we spent an hour talking about a lot of different issues, and this was kind of fun because it was just 2 candidates here for Council District 16. So we got to touch on everything and have a little fun also. And I'll make sure I send you those links. Althea, make sure we get you on. Yves, you too, for the 3 questions, 3 minutes. And thanks for being part of this, and good luck to you. And we'll see you soon.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really
Thank you guys so much.
And thanks, Althea, for doing this.
Absolutely. Everyone, have a good evening and happy Friday.
Yeah,
Happy Friday. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.